This is Helgoland, the only territory Britain ever permanently lost to Germany. Over 1,000 Germans still live on this tiny island in the North Sea today, but most people don't even know that it exists, let alone that it used to be an outpost of the British Empire, with its own Union Jack flag. So why would Britain uncharacteristically give one of its islands away to the Germans, of all people? Especially since they kind of ended up regretting it, and we'll see how Germany illegally used it during the war, forcing Britain to come back and obliterate an island that they used to own. Because this beautiful red sandstone island that you could walk tip to tip in about half an hour has had a turbulent and destructive past for somewhere so serene. When British merchants were cut off from Europe by Napoleon's blockade, Helgoland suddenly looked very appealing to them. It had originally belonged to Denmark, but Britain went in all guns blazing and took it off them in 1807, because owning this foothold so close to the mainland made it way easier and much less risky for European smugglers to come and buy from them. It had just a small local population who spoke Frisian, and was granted a tax-exempt, duty-free status as a way of incentivizing this island becoming a new major export hub for selling rum and sugar from the British Caribbean into mainland Europe. So now Britain owns this island, and it's making them all this money. Why would they ever let Germany have it? And how did Germany misuse it so badly that Britain had to return in the 1940s to drop the biggest bomb since Nagasaki here, turning the entire place into basically a series of bomb craters floating in the North Sea? Because after Napoleon was defeated and the normal peacetime economies resumed, Britain largely put Helgoland back on the shelf and went to play with its other toys. That in itself is not so unusual, but what happens next definitely is. To a certain kind of European nobility, Helgoland's combination of fresh air, tax exemptions, and distance from law enforcement makes it a dream tourist destination. And it becomes a real tranquility base of hotels and casinos where one can engage in recreational debauchery away from the watchful eye of polite society. The local Frisian population are making good money off of lost playboys and gamblers floating in from the European mainland, and this incentivizes them to learn German and handle German currencies, which makes total sense considering how close they are to Germany and how far they are from Britain. Britain has really had no use for Helgoland for a while, and so throughout the 1800s, some politicians are suggesting that they should just give it away to Germany. But, you know, come on now, Britannia never gives away a limb of our empire for nothing, and they know that Germany wants it so badly that soon they'll have to come up with a really, really juicy bargaining chip. Because from the Kaiser's point of view, Helgoland is a must-have for their sovereignty. The entire German navy is centered around getting ships out of the bays at Wilhelmshaven and Hamburg, and it's bad enough that Britain can blockade them out here, you know, that can't be helped. But why, oh why, let Britain have Helgoland and give them the ability to blockade you literally on your own doorstep? And then you add into that the fact that Germany's big new expensive infrastructure project, the Kiel Canal, is cutting right through here and will mean that all ships from the German Baltic will also come out directly opposite a British island. This can't go on. They have to take control of it for themselves. And yeah, of course it's a canal that's adding pressure to this narrative too. Everybody says that the Illuminati is either people or aliens, but I actually think it's a third thing. It's a room full of canals sat around a table pulling the strings. Because canals genuinely emerge as the key decision makers in every single historical story. But while the Brits know that Germany feels this way about their ownership of Helgoland, they do see it as kind of classic German paranoia. They know that if it ever did really come to war between the two nations, British Helgoland is so indefensible, so isolated and so remote that it would be the first thing to fall anyway, and Germany would easily take it for free on day one. But then, if the Germans are so set on actually giving something in return for it now, then, you know, let them. And their big step towards making that offer comes in the 1880s. By this time, the various Germanic states have finally unified into one country, and they realise that everyone else has way overtaken them in the empire business. So they hop on a quick call with all the European leaders to discuss how they should best carve up the whole of Africa and stay out of each other's way while doing so. Germany quickly moves into what is now Namibia and what is now Tanzania, and begins extracting resources like rubber and cotton, but it isn't long before this rubs up against Britain's own imperial ambitions. This is of course the era of Cecil Rhodes trying to take over all of Africa for Britain. They want to build the great Cairo to Cape Town railway, connecting all of their colonies directly, and that would be way easier if Germany didn't keep funding its own missions to go out and mess around in this middle part. Besides, politically speaking, German hold here on the east coast wasn't even that firm. They had established some trading posts and plantations, but even on those there were multiple uprisings that Britain actually helped put down for them. And so one day Britain puts its arm around Germany and is like, look mate, you're in over your head down here. Let's do a deal. Why don't you just go home and recognise our control of this entire area, and in exchange, we'll give you that little island that you want so badly. You can have your tiny floating toothpick outside Hamburg just for the price of getting out of our way in East Africa. Of course, there are some in Berlin who really question this proposition. They'd be backing away from trading and colonising rights to all of this land for somewhere so small. Even just Zanzibar, which is this island off the coast of East Africa, is 1,000 times the size of Helgoland, leading Bismarck himself to complain that the swap deal was like selling trousers for a button. And there are dissenters in London too, saying that Helgoland's glorious moment of helping to defeat Napoleon should attach it to the Union Jack forever, no matter if it's no longer that strategically useful anymore. So what about on the island itself? Well, local opinion there was pretty split. Some did argue that the status quo was actually pretty good for them, because a mini civilization living under British laws but having German tourist money pumped in is kind of the best of both worlds. But ultimately, they were Frisians, without a huge allegiance to either country, and of course, nobody in Berlin or London bothered to actually ask them what they wanted. But the deal gets done, and in August 1890, Kaiser Wilhelm II attends the handover ceremony to personally receive Helgoland for the Germans. Although he won't be the last German leader to visit or crop up in this story, because within 50 years a man with a very different kind of moustache is coming to Helgoland to make Britain regret ever letting Germany have it in the first place. In the short term though, the deal for sure made sense for both sides. Britain was genuinely the one better equipped to exploit all of this land and sink their teeth into the Sultanate of Zanzibar, and Germany really was the one who needed Helgoland for its naval independence. Although I do find it funny how Germany looks at the world map one day and is like, oh wow, look at that, Britain, they're lapping us. Maybe we need an empire too. But then on the day they finally arrive in Africa, Britain is like, you know, it's like when your baby crawls off of the playmat and you have to pick them up and put them back. Britain's like, hey, look over here, a piece of Europe. Just sits Germany back down and pats them on the head and ruffles their hair. I mean, the Kaiser was literally Queen Victoria's grandson, so there is a chance that that scene is historically accurate and did genuinely happen at some point. But on this day, when Britain hands over this sleepy fishing village with a few hotels, they have no idea that within 35 years they'll be fighting the first naval battle of World War I against Germany in these waters. During that war, Germany takes the opportunity to fortify Helgoland to such an extent that the Royal Navy is getting pretty worried about it. They've seen off Germany for now, but in the wrong hands, this place would be a real foothold from which to menace Britain's merchant ships, or even, in the worst case, attack the mainland one day. But no matter, they can deal with things like grown-ups. The Treaty of Versailles explicitly commits the defeated Germany to destroy all fortifications on Helgoland and never rebuild them. So that's that, right? Everybody respects that document and that pact forever, and we all go home. Well, not exactly, because this guy comes to Helgoland with his plan for Operation Lobster Claw. They're going to build, dredge, and build some more, shipping in thousands of tons of concrete until this place is the Super Gibraltar of the North Sea. And they set their own soldiers and Soviet prisoners of war to work, building deep water ports, train tracks, anti-air guns, U-boat pens and tunnels, striving to turn this ex-British island into a massive illegal fortress. British and German navies fight in the air and the sea around Helgoland, taking turns mining each other's submarines, until a 1,000-bomber raid by the RAF in April 1945 takes the island out of action. Germany had of course run out of road in the war anyway, without completing their full lobster claw vision on Helgoland, but they had built enough menacing stuff here that it left the occupying forces with a huge dilemma. They didn't trust this all falling into the wrong hands once more, and so they did this. That sound was the third biggest explosion of the Second World War. The first two are obviously in Japan, and Helgoland gets bronze, with some very happy chappies pushing the big red button for all the world to see. To prevent Helgoland ever being used to invade Britain, in 1947 they rounded up all the Navy's leftover ordnance and rigged the tunnels and the harbours to blow sky high as part of Operation Big Bang, proving to Germany that even a broke and devastated Britain could hit you as hard as it likes, whenever it likes. Civilians had to be evacuated to avoid the blast, and they weren't allowed back until 1952, when they had to rebuild their entire village at once with all of these prefab cookie cutter blocks. Because even after the Big Bang, the RAF spent the next few years using Helgoland as target practice for its bomber crews. Any visitor to the island today will tell you how haunting it is seeing these craters everywhere, and also how it's mostly known today, still, for that duty-free status. But they'll also tell you just how peaceful and beautiful a place that completely bans cars and bikes can be. Fascinatingly though, there is actually one other island in Europe that Britain lost, not to another nation this time, but to it becoming an independent country, which sounds good so far, but the drama in that particular story lies in the fact that its people had actually voted to remain British, and this is a link that will take you through to hear that full story next.